Well, Mr. Trump has gone to war with Iran on behalf of Israel and Israeli geostrategic security, or hegemony, depending on your point of view. And that puts a different light on my discussion of learning French with Nick Fuentes, because that was about nationalism, patriotism, the definition of the nation, for example, and how it relates to country, state, people. Four concepts, difficult to sort out. Some of the most interesting French historical research has concluded that the four concepts we've just allotted, nation, people, state, country, are so difficult to fit together, but you must be very aware of how they don't fit together and where they sort of fit together when they fit together. Now, given that, I thought the French tradition takes us to the very edge, the edge of something else, and that edge is Germany. So this podcast series, to start yet another, is to ask the question, or at least to hold out the prospect, of learning German with Nick Fuentes. Because as everyone has long suspected, in any serious discussion of fascism, for example, or for that matter nationalism, German reflection, German experience, German intelligence is at the heart of the question. When Nick Fuentes remarked rather loosely that he thought Hitler was cool, we're plunging into the Germanic world obliquely through an accidental opening in a door that we didn't know was there. But now we do. And so this series of podcasts will take us via the German reflection on their own fascist experience. And here I have particular preference for the writings of Ernst Nolte, my sadly now dead, but someone I was very fond of in real life, knew him, and benefited from his work enormously, to the irritation of my liberal colleagues, but that's, an old story. But relatedly, there is this question posed by Ernst Nolte in Three Faces of Fascism about the transition to modernity that is at work in the books and ideas of Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Max Weber, the German sociologist. And by passing through the prism of those three enormous thinkers, you can come to a more rigorous, shall we say, or more troubled, from some other point of view, relationship between those four ideas I've set out, between what it means to be a people, a nation, a state, and a country, and at the same time deal with capitalism and the transformative effects of modernity. So this will take us through to another level, well prepared for by the French, and we'll begin with a very famous work addresses to the German nation by a German thinker named Fichte, who is responding to the Napoleonic conquest of Germany, which is a consequence of the French Revolutionary Army's initial successes in overrunning large parts of Western Europe. So this French-German, here we've got into the heart of it. Now, interestingly, we won't proceed on this much deeper. We'll let the podcasts do the heavy lifting, as we say nowadays. But I will observe this, that German in the curriculum of the English-speaking world is, I suspect, and perhaps always has been, a minority language. In my high school, we didn't have German, even in the good old days. And there are high schools around us that did have German, and how well they were attended, and how, I assume it was an elective because it was a language of choice among more than one option. And in my case, as I've said before, Latin was required, and then you were allowed to choose French or Spanish. But good Catholic languages, of course. Germany is slightly ambivalent. But that was a way of dealing with it. Now, Australia, for example, if I'm not mistaken, and Australian listeners can correct me, that the Australian move to abandon French and German in secondary school in favor of Indonesian and Japanese, in many ways sensible, understandable. Being a Japan expert, I understood the focus on Japan, and I always thought this was an interesting angle of attack on Australia's relationship of enormous importance with China, trade and otherwise, trade and security. So you have this linguistic thing. Whether the Australians will come to regret or be more flexible about reintroducing, maybe they have already, French and German into the curriculum, because the answers to the questions are posed, obviously, by Australia's relationship with Indonesia and the larger investment security relationship with Japan and onward. That's a reality. That's the present day reality. When you begin to sort out the problem, think through the problem of what it means to be, what are Australians? Are they a people, a nation, a country, or a state, or some amalgam of the four? And if they're an amalgam of 3 or 4 of those ideas, how do those ideas relate in terms of hierarchy? Which is most important, which is less important, which is clear, which is less clear? All these sorts of things, the Franco-German tradition, if we illustrate it. Note that I haven't got to the point where I'm thinking, let's learn Indonesian with Nick Fuentes. That may come. Chinese is an interesting question here. But the real issue initially is French and German, because they have done, to repeat the cliched expression, done the heavy lifting of modernity, like is true of almost no other languages in the European perspective. And Europe is, as we're going to find out here, the place you have to deal to get your ideas straight before you can wrestle with the reality of, say, for example, of the emergence economically and otherwise of Southeast Asia, or for that matter, East Asia, or for that matter, India. So these European foundations are crucial, and we'll go back and see why we think the European foundations are crucial. And I will simply say here that they're not crucial because I'm a European. This is the fundamental error that Chinese commentators on the United States and vice versa make. My people, my nation, my history is primal, primacy, better, and everybody else must dance attendance on it in some version or another. The European approach to this is different. It's not that Europeans got there first, although we did, but it's given we've got there. Of what does reality? How do you stand outside your tradition to make sense of it? And this refusal to stand outside one's own tradition and reflect on it is where I think later cultures, in the sense that becoming nationalistic later, as in China now, or Japan was always more complex, but there was an issue there, and Southeast Asia is another one. If you come to this late in terms of modern statehood, then one of the most important, challenging things is to stand outside to get a perspective. And this Europe has done, and Europe has done from the beginning, from the ancient Greeks wrestle with their Middle Eastern and Egyptian neighbors in terms of making sense of high civilization in the pre-modern era. Then this ability to make sense of oneself, but stand outside oneself, is in many ways the supreme European gift to anyone who wants to reflect on what it means to be a people, a nation, a state, or a country, and how we've begun.